I mean, again, and this is something really I should have a conversation I shouldn't have on a talk or panel and more with a psychiatrist. But like, yeah, I do wonder if my love of extreme violence and gore comes from those very early, exposure to it.
Hi, I'm Gabe.
And I'm Kat.
And we're
the Ghouls Next Door.
Talk about spooky stuff.
As
and
we
what
do.
a special episode we have today. So this is our media analysis podcast from a horror lens, where we cover the psychological, historical influences behind our cinematic fears. And we have a very special episode.
Yeah, with guests.
Yes, with special guests. So as part of the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival, we are interviewing folks from The Horror Crowd, which is a documentary created by Ruben Pla about the horror crowd. His friends and fellow filmmakers, actors, scream queens, directors, spooky folk.
You name it.
Who come together to be excited about horror and talk about their influences on it and how they've been influenced by it. So this is a lovely, panel in line with Horror Crowd. So make sure you're checking out that film. It's going to be awesome. You'll enjoy it. You might see yourself in it. We specifically talk about Latino representation as well with our guests. So who you will be seeing is Ruben Pla, who is the director of Horror Crowd, and then we are joined also by Mike Mendez, who is a director in his own right of several things, including Don't Kill It and Big Ass Spider. And we have Charles de Lauzirika, who is also a director and producer known for Love Bite, which is a short film that is premiering in other film festivals. So make sure you check it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
So tune in, stay tuned for this awesome interview. It's lots of laughs, lots of fun. And be sure to check out the documentary. So thank you, Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. If this is the one thing that you're checking out for it, please be sure to check out the rest of it. You can find them online. There is the Latino Film Festival website right there. So make sure you take a look.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this Q&A about the Horror Crowd.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
I just want to start off by saying real quick that Lombardo Boyar was supposed to join us, our brother, but he's working, so he couldn't make it. And I never really liked him. That's right, Bardo. I I really liked you. No, we love Lombardo. It was a work thing, and he just heard today, so we totally understand.
Mm-hmm, yes.
There you go.
He'll be greatly missed, but we will fill the time with conversations for sure. Yes, but while we're here, we do have some lovely panelists from the Horror Crowd. We will start off with Ruben, who is the director of the lovely film Horror Crowd.
Wait, where's everybody? I'm alone.
You are an actor and director. You're known for Insidious, obviously the Horror Crowd, and The Kill. And many other things. You are around and you know people. So
I know these two guys anyway. I know that.
And Lombardo. So
we got that. Who we don't like.
Yes, today we don't.
Yes.
Exactly. We also have Mike Mendez, who is a director known for Don't Kill It, Big Ass Spider, Levantula.
There you go.
Convent, Killers, and more. Did I say it right?
Close enough. It doesn't matter.
And look at those Batmen behind him.
Yes.
That's all that matters. Yes.
There are so many Batman. I know a very big Batman fan who would love to see that. So I'm going to show him. I'm going to show him, and I'm very excited. And then we also, last but not least, have Charles, who's a producer, director, and writer known for Love Bite, Crave, Blade Runner, and more.
Charlie makes the best memes ever. He's the king of memes.
I don't, but that's okay.
Stop it.
I don't do memes anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that because you moved away from LA? Now you don't do
Exactly. Yeah, moving away from LA made me more of a grounded human being, away from all like the meme culture.
Right.
And the world is sad. There's an absence, and we all feel it.
Well,
I want to interject real quick that this is kind of funny. We got Mikey and Charlie here because Mike was the first person I interviewed for the Horror Crowd documentary, and Charlie was on the last day. You know, he just happened to come back into town because he left Los Angeles. He came back for a few days, and he was at a barbecue. And he's like, literally, the two bookends of the interview of the movie are here. Thought I'd let you know that.
Cool. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And
we love it. I'm the rear end of the documentary.
Oh.
Yes, and this interview as well. We saved the best for last. That's how it
Awesome.
works.
Great.
Well, I wanted to start off with our first question, just to jump in to Ruben about what it is that inspired you to create this documentary. Like, what were you like? You're like, the world needs this. and why?
Hanging with these two guys and many others, hanging with the Horror Crowd, as I called them. That's the nomenclature I use for them. Basically, I was traveling in those horror circles, and I did a promotional trailer with Mikey here for Overkill, which still should be made. Mike, right?
I agree. There's a story behind that. Why I don't think.
Yeah,
now, but that's
I know. Oh, but anyways, we did this promotional trailer, and then I met a bunch of people, and that opened doors. And I met James Wan. He put me in Insidious, and then I met even more people than Charlie. I met him later on, and I said, you know what? I need to get these people like on tape, and we just go like interview them, and talk about their lives, their loves, their passions. You know, what made them love horror, sci-fi, fantasy. See, Charlie, I included sci-fi. And I said, I'll just tape it like on my phone or something, no big deal, you know. And I met with my good buddy, Hank Braxton, who ended up being my co-producer. I said, I'm thinking I got this idea. He goes, I like the idea. Why don't I bring in some cameras, and lighting equipment, and sound kit, and we'll shoot some of the stuff in my studio where I work. And I said, sounds great. And we brought in his wife, Ariel Brockfeld, ended up being my producing partner. And then it just exploded from there. Everybody started to ask Mike and all these people, Darren Bousman and Oren Pelly and Charlie and everybody, and Lynn Shay, they all wanted to be in it. They all wanted to reveal their secrets to you guys, the audience. And that's how it happened.
Nice. That was a good teaser, right? It's like, here's all the names. You want to hear this story?
It's one of my monologues I use when I go on auditions. I use that as a monologue.
Yes, it's compelling. Immediately. Brilliant. Yes. I love the Horror Crowd. I love this like niche group that we get to see, right? That we get to, understand their love. Also finding as like horror fans, Kat and I, there are some similarities where we're like, oh my God, we feel that and have experienced those things too, even though we're so far away. Like we're totally disconnected from you guys, but have those similarities and those connections. And so I wanted to ask, do you feel like the Horror Crowd is an open and accepting space, like anyone can join?
Mike and Charlie, you want to take that one?
Sure. I'll just jump in here saying that, what kind of brings us together, as much as obviously we're in Los Angeles and we're in the film industry or whatever, but the core of it is truly just fandom. What it is that we love horror movies. We love movies in general, but horror movies is just our passion. And it's not so much like, oh, that person did this, let's hang out with them. It's like, oh, there's a midnight screening of Dead Alive at the whatever, and that's sort of kind of what keeps us together still, even through the pandemic, even through everything. It's the love of horror. And obviously there's a lot of support, somebody makes a film, somebody makes a documentary, somebody, whatever, we all, go to that screening whenever it happens and try to support and talk about it and share it. And I do think that there's a lot of support in this community, which is wonderful. But ultimately, yes, I do think it's an accepting community because, what brings us, if you love The Thing and Cronenberg, you're our people, and it's kind of welcome, and Latino all the better. So
beautiful, Mikey. That was really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I'll just say that to agree with what Mikey, who I've never called Mikey before in my life.
Thank you, Charles.
No, to add to that is like I definitely think it's a family, and like all families, there's ups and downs and there's dramas and things, and yet there's still great love and acceptance and commonality in the types of things that people love. And even if, like, for instance, if you're someone who's like seriously only about horror, you can still talk to them about other genres. You can still talk to them about filmmakers who aren't usually in the horror genre, because there are a lot of amazing classic horror films that were made by directors who didn't begin with horror and they haven't ended with horror. They just did their one little nibble at it and they did a great job. So there's a lot of, it's a big tent, and I think it's open to a lot of different types of fans and filmmakers and people who love movies. So of all the genres, I feel like horror seems to be the most inclusive, which is interesting because I think a lot of people a lot of normal people, quote unquote, kind of stay away from horror because they think, oh, those guys are freaks and they wear, fright rag shirts or whatever, like all day long. And it's like things like that, I feel like turn people off. But once they get to know the genre and the people in the genre, I think they would find it's a very loving, inclusive family.
Yeah.
Excellent, Charlie.
Period.
100%.
That's super real.
I agree.
Very nice.
It's funny. We actually became the Ghouls out of a similar realm, and that like we also went to horror screenings. That's how Gabe and I became friends. Is she would like put on Facebook. She was like, "Hey, someone comes. What was it? Don't Breathe, I think."
No,
Or
this was way
Ouija.
before that.
She put like
Yeah.
on Facebook, and I was like, "I'll go with you." And that's kind of like the origin of when we started to just really love horror and like hang out. So it's funny that that's how y'all became friends as well.
Absolutely.
It's funny what Mike and Charlie just said. It's really encapsulated what the film was about. We talk about that very thing about inclusiveness and the love of horror. And, we have ups and downs. Everything you both said is right there. Nicely done.
Okay, we selected the right ones.
Are there any kinds of horror films that get under your skin, or horror tropes that get under your skin?
I'm not a fan
Films
of
you don't like.
being killed. I don't like Cannibal Holocaust is not my jam, but other than that, if it's effective, I like it, so.
Yeah, bad scripts are my pet peeve. I don't like bad scripts in any genre, but in horror, you can have great production value, big stars and whatever. If the script is crappy, doesn't have a strong 3-act structure, I'm out.
I think the great thing about horror, though, in general, is that because the budgets tend to be lower, it forces the filmmakers to be more inventive and creative and come up with new ways of telling stories and reinventing the genre, which is why every time like a big horror film hits, like let's say The Conjuring, right? Conjuring comes out and it was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then you have Hollywood trying to make 1 million Conjurings, but filmmakers inspired by The Conjuring say, I'm going to go off to my own little corner of the genre and create something that's hopefully as impactful as that, but is not The Conjuring. And I think that's why horror is evergreen, because it keeps reinventing itself.
Right.
And so many other genres just do the same thing over and over again. And horror is so diverse in its ideas and its kind of creativity. It'll never end. And that's what I love about it. And that's why I don't really turn off if someone says, oh, it's a found footage movie. It's like, well, what kind of found footage movie is it? What's the angle on this one? I don't immediately switch off because of that. So, but yeah, that's why I love horror.
I think Post is a good example of what Charlie's talking
Right,
about.
exactly.
A pandemic, it's cripples the world, and we're all brought to our knees and can't do anything. Yet there are still horror movies that are just like this, like what we're looking at right now. But someone said, "Hey, but let's add a horror twist to it." So no, sorry. Anyway, but yeah, so creativity is everything, Charlie said. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely, horror has often been like a mouthpiece for whatever culture and society is dealing with at that time, right? It's just like, oh, when was like seeing zombies evolve over time too is like, what are they focusing on? Is it race? Is it consumerism? Like, individuality? Like, what are we representing as the, our society's horrors right now? And so you kind of get to see a glimpse into what people were going through during that specific time period. So it's always changing.
Yeah, that was a big inspiration for me on my short film Love Bite that's at festivals now. Is my wife and I, we'd been wanting to make something together for a while, and then she had this idea about an old couple arguing during the zombie apocalypse, like an old couple bickering, and it was cute and it was really like a sweet little film. But then I had to get my hooks into it. And I rewrote it because my feeling was George Romero's Dead movies aren't really about zombies. They're about something else. They're about like how people treat each other, but also some underlying social or political commentary. And at the time we wrote Love Bite, which was early 2019, we were deep into the terrible political divide that we're in right now here in America and probably all over the world, but certainly here. And I thought, let's examine that. Let's examine how we interact with each other through the prism of politics. And then also just having no idea that literally a few months after we premiered the film, we'd be dealing with a global pandemic. These characters are arguing about how a virus spreads. Like they're not entirely sure. And their decision-making is based on their politics. Like we got so quote unquote lucky in the worst way that we tapped into something that was very much kind of like happening in the real world. And that's why I love George Romero's Dead films. It's like, it's not really about zombies or even surviving the apocalypse. It's more about what was happening when he made those movies. So in my tiny little, really infinitesimal kind of tiny way, I'm glad that we got to make a short that embraced that storytelling, that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, Charlie, you mentioned Night of the Living Dead and Romero, and then in the documentary The Horror Crowd, we have a whole segment on that, just on that. And Charlie does some really detailed analysis of Romero and his social impacts, and the way that he cast Wayne Jones in the movie, and also the cultural conflicts that there are. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Race definitely plays a big part, often in horror. There's always discussion. There's the documentary Horror Noir, which is super helpful in seeing the way that race has been represented over time in horror and evolved and continues to progress and be better. Like, Get Out, right? Like being that step in the right direction for and showing us and allowing us to have films like Us after that. And I did want to talk specifically about, as this is the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival, that Latino or Latine audiences are amongst one of the largest demographics that love horror, like in horror. But there is, small minimal representation in film, like on screen. Like there's not often that I see a character that looks like me, that I could be like, oh, that's great. Like we have lots of final girls, and we, have the blonde victim, or you have those things. But there is kind of a lack there. And I wanted to kind of pick your brains about why you think that is, and also how you feel we could elevate Latino stories, and have some more highlights of that and kind of get those out there, so that people can appreciate them, seeing themselves on screen.
Well, let me jump in here, just really fast, saying that I couldn't agree more, and I think it's high time that the Latinos get their moment in the sun here, especially in the horror genre, because we have had so many different ethnic, whether it be anthologies or films or just kind of movements, and I don't feel we've had that Latino moment yet, but I feel that moment is coming, and I cannot say anything, but perhaps someone here may be working on something that is a very pro-Latino horror project that will bring a few voices out to play with us and do something that does hopefully speak to exactly what you're talking about telling Latin stories, telling about Latin myths, different lore from Latin America, and seeing faces we recognize on camera, and I do 100% think it is time. There is a certain kind of group of Latinos that love horror. I call them the Satanic Hispanics, and time for Satanic Hispanics to rise. So
yes, I love that. I'm getting that on a t-shirt.
That's great to hear, Mike. I mean, that's really, I agree 100% with you also. And the fact that something may be up in the air is wonderful and fantastic. Charlie, is that you who's doing that?
Oh yeah, obviously. My main character is named Mikey. And
Miguelito.
Yeah.
Mikey de Lauzirika. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, we definitely all three agree on that whole thing, and it's wonderful that ethnics of all kinds are being more represented. But yeah, donde están los Latinos? ¿Qué pasa?
There's one called Mexican Barbaro, but which is all in Spanish. But I don't feel we have the kind of like Latin America that is in English for everybody kind of movie. Again, I want to help. I want to see that happen. So.
Yeah,
and I see even in the commercials, I see it because I go off for a lot of TV shows and commercials, and you watch commercials and in English channels, and Once in a while, you see some Latinos here and there. But it's like, what's going on? They're only on Telemundo and Univision. It's like, hello, this guy's like, we like to see us on the American screens too. So
it's bizarre to me because, especially, I know Charlie used to live in Los Angeles, and his heart is still here with us. But Los Angeles being such a Latino community in the entertainment industry, it's just like, why are we kind of silent here? I'm saying we do get the occasional guest star or whatever, and we have a few directors that are working, but it's just like, why is there not more of this? Why are we not seeing more Latino names in the credits at the end of movies? So
well, especially when you have an Oscar winner like Guillermo del Toro,
right?
In the mix, you would think that would have like opened up far more opportunities than it has. So again, hopefully, I feel honestly, and this might just be me, I feel like the pandemic has caused a lot of rethinking and a lot of just maybe clarity about the way forward. I hope. Just the people I talk to seem to be more interested in more diverse storytelling, more inclusive process of filmmakers and actors and writers and everything. So I hope that's true. I definitely, like you guys said, there's something in the air. I feel like I've heard that from people, and hopefully it's true.
Hey, I was wondering, Gabe and Kat, why do you think it is? I'd like to get your opinions on why you think that is, that there isn't more inclusivity for Latinos.
Yeah, well, for one, it's a struggle, and what we've seen, especially in our show and kind of covering specifically representation quite often. We did at the beginning of this year a whole For the Culture series where we were covering specific cultures and like, we talked about blood quantum, so indigenous peoples, we talked about La Llorona, not the curse of the real one.
The curse of was different.
Yeah, and what we often found in our research was that there are lots of barriers for them to get funded and to get off the ground. For Blood Quantum, it took years for him to be able to get that through, or even thinking of something like Sorry to Bother You, right? Like it took a long time, like several years for him to get greenlit for something like that. And still not even having to change the script because those same social issues are present. Same with Blood Quantum. And so it's really like letting those opportunities come through. I remember, there's parts in the documentary about people kind of getting these ideas and pushing them forward or getting opportunities before there's even a script made. And as exciting as that is, it's also like a part of me is sad because it's like, think about all these, people who look like me, who have stories that I could resonate with, who are having to kind of go through these like different boundaries to just get their one script made when we're handing off, opportunities to scripts that aren't even here yet. And kind of like, I think that we need, others in the industry who are already there and established to be that helping hands to kind of pass that torch. And to also, I think with, Jordan Peele kind of showing that like people are here for like the Black horror, right? And that we can do something like Us, which is just has a Black family, but it's not specifically about race. It's more about classism, right? Showing that like, oh, people like that. So now hopefully people will see that they're going to like other stories too. And that, we are coming out, we're showing up to watch them in large numbers. Imagine if we were also the ones on screen, like it'd be even more. How excited would we be if we had those opportunities?
There's a lot to draw from, not only from like the political experience of, whether it be border stories or whatever, but then there's a lot of just lore and creatures and myths that go back, to the Aztecs, so there's so much in different countries. There's all sorts of different things. And there's all sorts of really exciting filmmakers in Venezuela and Argentina. And I think there is a lot of rich stuff to play with there. And I think that I'm hoping the time is coming. So.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yes. Long overdue. Yeah, I agree. I was just reading, and I know it's becoming it got greenlit for, I think, a show, but Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And I just remember being very excited to have a Gothic story in which there's a protagonist who can look like I can put myself into the story. And I was like, it took me a moment to have to rework my brain to do that. But there was genuine excitement. And so I think other people would feel that too. And if we can see that like on screen, it would be like, oh, I'm so excited. Like I love crafty. Did you say that with people like me? What?
Did you say that got greenlit or maybe greenlit?
Yeah, it is being made into a TV show. I just don't remember for which platform.
Oh, okay. Right.
But I do know it got greenlit. And I'm like, oh.
Did you guys hear about that?
No, I don't know.
I hadn't heard that. Sounds great. I mean, I didn't know that either.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Kat, do you have a question? Putting you on the spot.
Yes.
Kat's on delay, everybody, in case you're wondering why she pauses.
In our short horror film. Yeah, I know. Sorry.
It is a little delayed, so it's hard to always answer quickly. But in our short horror films, we like to play on horror tropes and the expectations that we see. And I think there's like, if you think of how different people are represented in film, what are some tropes that you think are tired or maybe need to be kind of like hung up and let out to dry so no longer need to be used that you might see in some horror films that you've seen?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough question. I'd say it's more an attitude thing. And I'm going to like kind of pick on a movie that's not a horror movie, but I look at something like Mortal Kombat and there's just too many studio notes that kind of try to fit into this kind of homogenized, thing of like, we need a character that the audience relates to, that we can see through their point of view. And I think that kind of like almost, I don't know, textbook storytelling filmmaking is what's kind of getting under my skin lately is just, these kind of you just hear the studio notes and you hear the executives going, well, they can't relate to that because it really should be a female lead. That should be, and
so they're white people then, Mike, right?
Well, not necessarily, but yes. But no. But no, I just kind of feel that and like kind of like Charlie was saying earlier, it's like, oh, The Conjuring, we must make a ghost movie about a family in a house. Blumhouse, we must make domestic thrillers that are contained about, and it's that kind of thing of like, we can make movies about anything. Can we have fucking monsters? I like monsters. Why can't someone make them From Dusk Till Dawn with fucking vampires and shit and guns and stuff? Like, this is what I miss. But instead, we're like, no, that's not what's selling. It's all about domestic thrillers. We need more Purges, more La Lloronas, Curse of La Lloronas. I'm sorry. That's executives talking. But we're kind of going, no, we want. I think that's why things like Hereditary or The Witch were so exciting, because it was like, haven't seen that before. That's new. And that's what I think we want a little bit more of.
I mean, kind of repeating what I said earlier, is like horror is
push away from. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. No, horror is kind of like an endless gold rush, I feel like. And once you strike gold, everyone comes racing to your spot. And I think the smart people are going to a completely different area to explore. They may not find the gold right away, but for sure you're not going to get the gold that was just found because it's already been taken. So I think when somebody, hits it big with a particular type of film, go someplace else and try something else in horror. Horror is like the one genre that you can really, I think, benefit from that type of approach.
Yeah, agreed.
Speaking of Hereditary, my daughter loves Hereditary. She's in college. And that movie really struck a chord with her,
Sure.
The writing, the directing, the acting, everything was just like,
because it was really good, solid filmmaking, and that's what spoke. That's what jumped out. Is just it was like, it's different, but you felt you were in really capable hands, and really like we're taking you places, and it, that movie gets under your skin and really disturbs you. Some people hate it. I love it, but
I love it.
Yeah,
me too.
But it's truly disturbing, and that's great.
And it comes from a director who wasn't. I mean, he made mostly shorts before then, but I mean, it's like not a horror director. And I've been thinking about like some of the most classic horror films are made by non-horror directors or previously horror directors. I mean, Night of the Living Dead, The Omen, Jaws, Exorcist, like all these like really great, scary classics came from directors who hadn't really been like the horror type before. So that's why I think horror is such a great genre, because anyone can come in, find their voice, tell their story, and move on to other things. You don't have to stay in horror and still without evolving. But I think that it's a really great genre for all different types of voices and all different types of storytellers.
Speaking of Exorcist, obviously Friedkin, that he's more of a thriller director, and then William Peter Blatty, who wrote it. I was just watching a documentary the other day. He was known for comedy. He was a comedy writer. And he said, I'm going to do something completely different. He approaches a priest, a friend of his, says, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, and can you help me with the details and so forth and the background? And the priest goes, I'll help you if you take it seriously, because he was known as a comedy writer. And he wrote this horrific movie, novel, then a movie, which we cover in the horror crowd in detail. And Lobat de Boyard, who's not here, said he saw it when he was 6 years old. His mother took him to see it, and it and other people saw it at a young age too. So
yeah, comedy and horror have similar kind of build up and tension. Like they, you build it up and then it's like release that really gets you. Like it's that adrenaline rush. It's a little more subtle in comedy. You don't really realize you're chasing it in the same way that you are in horror, where you're like, oh, yes, which is like really nice, which is why blending horror and comedy works pretty well. And
Mike is the master of blending horror and I'm not trying to compliment you guys, but it's the truth. I've always said that.
Thank you.
I've said it to Mike a million times. He can mix with Big Ass Spider, Don't Kill It, with Dolph Lundgren. He mixes comedy and horror so well.
Unfortunately, nobody wants to see horror comedies.
You know what? Maybe that Latino film you're talking about can have a lot of comedy horror and it'll work out.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I remember seeing Don't Kill It at like one of the earliest screenings, and just the audience reaction to the first 5 or 10 minutes, or whatever it was.
It's hilarious.
It was off the charts. I mean, it was like amazing. Like I was not expecting that type of like Avengers Endgame response to.
It's the most fun in a theater. It's just that it's such a look, and I find this out the hard way. It's just such a niche audience, that it's very rare that a horror comedy breaks through. You have like Shaun of the Dead or Zombieland every once in a while, but unfortunately, everyone's trying to make horror movies. And when I come into a meeting, they're like, "Well, you make silly spider movies, and bloody. You don't make horror movies." And I'm like, "Well, I do, but I just put my own thing into them." And so I'm kind of neither here nor there. So it's a blessing and a curse. Let's put it that way. But I love doing it, and I will continue, even though I shouldn't.
No, you should. You should. Kat, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just saying because you had mentioned that. That a lot of folks have seen films when they were very young, and that's what sort of influenced their love of horror later in life. And that there's like strong connections between getting scared as a kid. I know that's how I kind of fell in love with horror, as I was watching Terminator at the age of 5. And not that Terminator is like an exclusively horror, it's like horror sci-fi. Still one of my favorite movies of all time. But
so your parents took you to see Terminator at 5? Is that what happened?
No, actually, it was my dad.
Even with that sex scene in there,
on what was age appropriate. Yes,
your dad is cool in my opinion. So your dad.
I gotta interject about Mike here. Mike saw The Hills Have Eyes at age 3, which is really thumbs up.
Yeah,
and that comes out of. Well, you say it probably effed me.
I'm sure it did.
That explains so much.
Right?
No, I had no, for better or worse, I had no restriction on what my parents took me to as a kid. So yeah, I saw Terminator in the theater. I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Carrie. I mean, you name it, all the classics I got to see at a theater. Far too young. I mean, starting at age 3, but somehow. At some point it starts speaking to you. At first you're scared of it, but then at some point it's like, no, you belong here, and then then you make friends with it. It's all good
forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, I saw a Child's Play marathon when I was 3. So awesome. With my grandmother. So my mom was like, "What are you doing?"
Your grandmother liked dolls.
Yeah, yes. I mean. There's my dolls right there. Yes. But one of our questions that I think I was getting to is, what do you feel about like allowing kids to watch horror young? Like, what is your opinion? Do you think it's good?
Charlie, what do you think about that?
I think it depends on the type of horror. Like for instance, my first, and this isn't like straight up horror, but it's horror kind of hybrid is Jaws. Like I was 7 years old when I saw Jaws. It was terrifying. In fact, when my mom took me to see it opening weekend in 1975, I couldn't wait to see the movie. And there's a huge line to get in. And we were waiting in line, and I just could not wait. So I went into the theater, peeked in, opened the door, and it was the scene when the estuary victim's leg hits the bottom of the ocean.
Uh-huh.
And that's the first imagery I saw of Jaws, was that guy getting just like mauled and his leg dropping to the bottom. And I immediately shut the door and ran back in line. And And I felt a thrill. It was almost like a drug. It kicked into my brain. I just felt like, oh my God, that was terrifying. And I want to run away, but I can't because I love it so much. Wow. You know, it was like a weird conflicting, reaction. So that, and then my mom took me to see Alien when I was 11, opening night at the Egyptian. And that was terrifying, but in all kinds of different ways. And I tell this story in the horror crowd is that my parents had a very ugly divorce, but they still kind of collaborated on getting me to see Alien. So my dad went to see Alien opening day in the morning, called her to say, okay, he said, it's okay. Just when the guy starts choking at the dinner table, cover his eyes. And she said, okay. So we go and we're watching it. By the way, the face hugger scene was terrifying on its own. I shouldn't have seen that either, but I did. And so John Hurt starts choking at the table, and my mom puts her hand over my face, but she's so scared. It's literally, it's like that. And I'm watching like that. And that was also, again, like this scarring process that yet I think was good because it just kind of prepared me for dealing with life's horrors, I guess, in kind of a harmless virtual way. And then the next big icon for me as a kid was Night of the Living Dead, was catching that on Channel 5 in LA and just seeing moments of it, like not the whole thing all the way through the first time, but this notion of people coming to consume you was a really scary thought. And then around the same time, the trailer for Dawn of the Dead had come out, and that last shot in the trailer of the zombies all coming off the elevator, like coming to the camera, these things were like really scary, terrifying moments that somehow gave me strength. And so I think if you are seeing horror films at a young age that give you kind of tools to deal with bad situations and scary moments, that's a good thing. If it's stuff like that's like kind of like, I don't know, really gory or torture porn or whatever, probably not. That's probably for later years. But I think if it's more of a thrill, definitely, I think younger ages are able to handle it if they have an appetite for it. If they don't, they don't. That's fine too. But I enjoyed it. It gave me a thrill. It got me excited, but it also prepared me for dealing with problems and dealing with dramas and all kinds of conflict in real life. And it's, again, in a movie kind of way, it helped me.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because Charlie talks about that in the horror crowd, as you mentioned, the whole covering the eyes thing, and then in that segment about Night of the Living Dead, Alien, Cyrus Voris, who wrote Demon Knight, also talks almost exactly this, and they didn't know each other. And he's doing the whole thing, watching the movie like this, and I intercut those scenes, and it looks like it was set up, but the two guys talked about it completely separate from each other. It's funny how the things bind us like that, those kind of movies, those kind of experiences when we're young kids,
Cool. And I would say, like, I thankfully I'm not a parent, but if I was, I would take, caution and trying to, introduce horror responsibly. I think there's enough kind of gateway horror movies that exist, whether, you can even start with Hotel Transylvania and things like that, that are charming and delightful, and start with the Universal monster movies or whatever, and then slowly build to it. And then I think it should be also up to the kid to see if it's something that they like and, want to continue with. But if they have it in them, they will. And then just, don't start off with, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre at 5, like kind of build to that, that would be my advice. So.
Yeah.
Good advice.
We're strong believers at the Ghouls of scaring your kids, responsibly, goosebumps,
Do you guys have kids, either one of you?
No.
Kat or Gabe? No? No. I'm the only person on this panel who has kids. So I shielded them when they were young from stuff, but then later I took them. But not when they were 3 or 5.
But look, in some ways I thank my dad for it. In some ways it was like, dude, what the fuck?
Why? Yeah. Definitely no hostel for kids.
It's a thing that makes you thankful for it when you're older.
Right, sure, exactly.
Like, cool, now I'm weird and it's a good personality trait and I'm excited about it.
Again, and this is something really I should have a conversation I shouldn't have on a talk or panel and more with a psychiatrist, but like, I do wonder if my love of extreme violence and gore comes from those very early, exposure to it, and it can
I would say yes.
Because I don't like violence. I like extreme violence. It's like, it's not enough for someone to get stabbed. They stab and bleed all over the place, and then they got to cut his head off, or whatever, for example.
Just to throw one out.
As long as it's not real life, it's fine.
So
but
yeah,
Mike, I could never imagine you actually in real life causing violence of any
No,
kind. I mean,
not at all.
that's the
Not at
thing.
all. I would get my ass kicked.
Well, if you had a knife, you'd be okay though.
Maybe. But yeah, no, I'm not a violent person whatsoever. But on cinema, you know, and in movies, I feel that's a tool, and that's the language we get to use, and I love it, you know. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a safe place to kind of live out those things and experience those. And there's an ending, right? So there's like release at the end to be like, oh, like either the good guy prevails or they don't, but you still get to watch the credits roll and be like, okay, that was make believe. So I can go life.
You get to go
like
home
Jace Anderson. Like Jace Anderson says in The Horror Crowd, she's a writer, and she talks about it's like being in control of the situation. You can always, control which way the lead character, which is usually you, is what she says, goes and how they survive or don't survive. And it's for her, it was very fulfilling to do that.
One highlight of my life is that I got to spend a fair amount of time interviewing Wes Craven, many years ago. And he had said something about that, just kind of said a lot of things that stuck with me that day. But one of the things was that, like, look, horror movies are about evil trying to conquer somebody and the person usually overcoming it. And that in some ways means that horror is kind of a story of hope. It's about good overcoming evil. And so at the heart of it is like, I think horror is actually our morality tales and are very positive, in the long run.
Except for Drag Me to Hell.
Right, sure, yeah. Occasionally you get the dark ending. John Carpenter certainly does the dark endings, which are great, and we love them too. But ultimately you get the final girl that turns it around and brings Freddy back to to wherever he came or defeats Jason or whatever, and that's kind of a nice thing, and it should always give us hope and always give us a drive to like overcome problems and surmount whatever. So
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely there's an empathy that comes from it too, because you're like put into the shoes of someone who has to experience those things. So, we get often asked whenever we're interviewed, because they're like, are you desensitized to violence now? Do you think like if someone was stabbed in front of you, you wouldn't react? Or are you now cold-hearted and dead inside because of your love for horror? Which is absolutely untrue. If anything, we're more sensitive to those things because we're putting ourselves through those, and we get to see like firsthand some of the experiences of other people. And I think there's a beauty to that in horror that doesn't get highlighted. Like it doesn't get enough credit, which leads me to one of my questions, which is, how do you all feel about the phrase elevated horror?
It's like a catchphrase, it's like something that like, that I don't know. It doesn't mean much to anything. That goes back to kind of my complaint about studio executives or whatever that feel that they're saying something and it's got to be like this. But good horror is elevated horror. I mean that's just make a good movie, and then it's elevated horror. Now look, I think the difference is that some of us enjoy the cheese, and some of us like to too much, like to revel in it perhaps. But ultimately I don't think that matters. It's just about telling a good story that's well acted and executed well. And I feel that is elevated horror, but it just means it's good ultimately.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, I think the term is more offensive than the actual sense of making an elevated horror film. I mean, it's just basically saying it's artisanal, small batch, locally sourced horror. It's kind of like just the hipster way of saying, oh, it's better than the normal.
Yeah.
So I love elevated horror. The phrase itself, whatever, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. Some people are deeply offended by it. Others don't care. And I'm kind of in the don't care part of it, but it's fine. It's just a term that's very fashionable right now. But the films that fall under the so-called elevated horror category, I love. I think they're great. I love when horror, swings for the fences and tries to do new, bold things that are not the usual, slasher monster movies, but those are great too. Like, that's the thing. So long as it's good, like Mike said, if it's good, it's good. It doesn't matter if it's elevated or B or whatever. It just make a good movie. That's all I ask.
I always thought it was called elevator horror, like, set in an elevator, like Devil, the movie Devil. That's elevator. No, I agree.
Horror?
I agree with those guys 100%. Yeah, it's all about the script. I've always said that. It's about the script. If it's good, production value, acting, everything. Who cares about terms and phrases and things?
Yeah, we agree. We
Going
think
back to elevator horror really fast, I was going to agree with Charlie that the Dawn of the Dead elevator gag is something that terrified me, and I couldn't stand in front of elevators. And I didn't even see the movie.
That's funny.
Yeah, I didn't even see the movie because that was unrated, and that I couldn't get into because you had to be over 18 to see it. But the commercials ended with that shot, and it's terrifying. Just always have my mother stand in front of me before the elevator opened, So
yeah, so mom gets it first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I stopped going to malls. I didn't want to go to Pennsylvania because of it. I don't want to go anywhere near Pittsburgh or anywhere around there. So I'm sorry about it. Philly's far enough away, I guess, but maybe not. I don't know.
Take that, consumerism.
Hey, Mike, did the elevator scene in the Shining trailer affect you that way too? The blood rushing out?
That's awesome. Great.
Yeah, it was cool. It didn't scare me, but it was cool.
Ruben, for your next documentary, call it elevator horror.
I think I'm going to call it elevator horror and have Devil and Shining and
the lift. Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be cool. The lift, right? Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, we feel like just inherently horror is elevated. Like it is always trying to tell you something, even when it's just entertaining you.
Sure.
And agree that it's just like a fun term people are using and it's like, okay, if that's going to get you to watch it and appreciate it for what it is, then fine. But know that we've already been out here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this conversation. For people who are watching, please check out Horror Crowd. It is super fun. If you feel that you belong to the horror crowd like we do, you definitely see yourself in there. There's a lot of similarities where we're like, ooh, that. Where I was like, me too.
Also, we want to say a real quick thank you to Philadelphia Latino Film Festival for bringing the horror crowd to their audience. We really appreciate that. It means a lot. And the fact that these wonderful gentlemen are here joining us and talking, you ladies talking about Latino subjects also besides horror, it's been a blast for me anyway.
Yay. Yeah. So exciting.
Thank you. And off topic, I just want to say I miss these guys. I haven't seen them in a long time, and it's good to see them, even if it's in a little square.
And you know what, Mike? Since you said that, missing guys, I just want a quick shout out to our buddy Shem Andre Byron, who passed away recently unexpectedly, and he was part of the horror crowd, and we miss him a lot. One of the sweetest human beings literally I've ever met, always willing to help everybody, come in and help you on whatever you're doing. What do you need? Very creative, artistic person, and we lost him way too soon. So shout out to him.
Not Latino, but would appreciate the cause. So
it's fine. Yeah, he's okay anyway. No, seriously. It was tragic, and the best of his wife Danica, and there it is. Yeah,
that hurt a lot, but yeah. But anyway,
Yes.
But just the living guys. And I hope to be in Philadelphia soon, and meet you all and go to the Mooter or whatever, and that would be great. So
yes,
it's a fun museum. You're right.
Yes, the horror hub that we are, or just check out anything from Shyamalan.
Right,
around here,
right, Shyamalan, right.
The Shyamalan, that would sound
in
fun.
our neighborhoods. Is there any last thoughts about the horror crowd, or for anyone who wants to take a chance on horror to get them hooked?
Yeah, I want to say one thing. All the festivals that the horror crowd's been in, I've talked to a lot of people, in Europe and South Africa, Canada, South America, and so many of them have been affected by the film, meaning that it spoke to them, that it reached them. It's something like, a little kid in Scotland tells me, I'm here, I'm a geek, a horror geek, and I don't even have a movie theater in the town I live in, but I feel like, this movie really, I connected with the movie and it spoke to me. And that is just so, I never expected that to happen on a worldwide, basis like that. When I started, I'll interview my friends on my phone. All of a sudden people saying this really affects me. I want to go start my own horror crowd and have my own jump cut cafe and do horror trivia once a month and all this. And it's just been so rewarding. And I want to thank these two gentlemen here for being a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us in it.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet, by the way. I just want to point that out.
Mike, you're in it for about a half hour solid. I'm in it for about 90 seconds. So that's
God.
All right. First of all,
I haven't seen your new short either, so I feel I need to have a film festival.
So it just got accepted to Shriek Fest in LA.
Yeah, cool.
So Carly and I will be probably coming out to LA for Shriek Fest and Love Bite, and please come and let's have a gathering. Let's have a horror crowd reunion of some kind.
Absolutely.
An elevated gathering.
Elevated
on a
gathering.
platform.
Yeah, we'll have, have monocles and canes and top hats. And
I say, lovely film. Lovely film.
It's going to be a very elevated gathering. Yeah.
Yes.
In an elevator.
In an elevator.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thanks you all so much. I hope that people are enjoying the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival. Check out the Horror Crowd. And there's quite a lot of really amazing short films that are horror and full films that are horror in this festival. So please check them out when you can. And thank you for listening to the Ghouls Next Door. All right. Don't get married.
Bye.
Awesome.
Delete your kid.
Thank you.